Yeah, just go with your stuff. It's fine. Just go with your stuff. It's fine.
And what did you think of the Acropolis? It truly is quite something, isn't it? A sacred sanctuary and an architectural marvel, all in one. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. You're confident enough for a test? Very well. Let us see how much you know. Which two gods competed for Athens' patronage? Correct. It was Poseidon and Athena who fought for Athens' patronage. As for who won, the answer is in the city's name. On to the next question. Who sculpted the statue of Athena in the Parthenon? Praxiteles sculpted a marble statue of Artemis that stood in the Vravronion. Try again. No, I must confess, I made that name up. Clever, huh? Polygnotos was a renowned Greek artist, but he was a painter, not a sculptor. Try a different answer. Correct. The renowned sculptor Phidias made the statue, which was considered one of his masterpieces. And now, the final question. Which king's tomb was believed to be under the Caryatid porch? I'm afraid not. Menelaos was known for two things: marrying Helen of Troy and going to war when she left him for the beautiful Paris. Try another answer. Leonidas was a Spartan king. He would not have been buried in Athens. Try again. That is correct. Cecrops was the mythological first king of Athens, and his tomb was said to be under the Erechtheion. It seems you know much about this place. Well done, wanderer. Very well. On to the next turn.
Treasure.
Canasos, traveler, where the Minotaur once prowled. My name is Herodotus, and I am a traveler from Canasos. I retrace the cause of various events, such as wars and great calamities. I describe what I see and record what I'm told, all with the aim of providing a better understanding of why these things occur. Look for me to introduce you to many sites. Canasos was the seat of the old Minoan civilization, where King Minos once supposedly ruled. These ruins have been the backdrop for many important events in both history and mythology. Look for me when your visit is over, and we'll discuss what you've seen.
The island of Crete was first settled around 8000 BCE. Over time, significant towns and maritime trade began to develop. Palaces were built, destroyed, and then rebuilt, culminating in what archaeologists call the Neopalatial Period, which began around 1700 BCE. This period lasted for over 300 years and is considered the golden age of Minoan civilization. The largest palace of this period was located in Cnossos and featured maze-like complexes of workshops, temples, courts, throne rooms, and living areas, as well as paved roads and advanced plumbing and draining. Trade and external relations were important to the Minoans, and their networks extended across the eastern Mediterranean. As a result, the people of Crete and the lands they traded with often influenced each other and exchanged ideas, usually through peaceful interactions instead of military conflict. The island of Crete was first settled The settlement of Cnossos was established as early as the 7th millennium BCE. Today, one of the site's most notable landmarks is the palace ruins, located on the Kafala Hill. The ruins are split into two phases: the old palace, which has been poorly preserved, and the new palace. The new palace of Cnossos had a surface area of approximately 13,000 square meters, making it the largest Minoan palace. Its focal point was a central court, which was probably used for ceremonial activities. The Minoan palace centers collapsed when Crete was overrun and conquered by a Mycenaean invasion from mainland Greece. However, the date of the final destruction of Cnossos' palace is still unknown. During the New Palace phase, the ground floor was dedicated to economic activities and contained large storage rooms. The residential quarters, which notably had toilets, were located southeast of the central court, at the foot of the grand staircase. The palace was lavishly decorated with wall paintings depicting things like bull-related sports and richly dressed women. Large stone horns of consecration, which were important Minoan religious symbols, hung prominently in the west court. Other notable parts of the palace include the theatrical area, which is believed to have served as a viewing space, the tripartite shrine, which was dedicated to the worship of an important Minoan deity historians refer to as the Mother Goddess, and the Piano Nobile, a grand space located on the palace's second floor. During his trips to Crete, archaeologist Arthur John Evans discovered several ancient tablets. They eventually led him to define the forms of Minoan writing known as Linear A and Linear B. The Minoans used these forms of writing for recording many things, including business transactions. For example, one clay tablet discovered at the Palace of Canasos was inscribed in Linear B script. The tablet detailed the transfer of coriander, often used in the perfume industry, between a man named Cyprios and another person named Twinon. The deciphering of tablets such as these has given historians great insight into many aspects of Minoan culture and society. According to myth, the half-man, half-bull Minotaur was born after Queen Pasiphae slept with a bull sent by the gods as punishment upon her. This embarrassed King Minos, but he could not bring himself to kill the Minotaur. Instead, he hid the monster in a labyrinth constructed by Daedalus.
It's on top of the cabinet. I forgot to move it.
Where is it?
On top of the cabinet. I'll have to go get it. Top of the fridge.
Reach up there. You gotta wait up at the top.
Yeah, it's for emergencies. I'll have to go. Yeah, I'll have to come up there. Oh, Jesus.
Daedalus
I'll have
was
to
an
come up.
important figure
Man.
in Greek mythology, an ingenious
Don't knock it
inventor
down, you'll wreck
who
it.
once became so jealous of his
Wow.
similarly clever nephew that he threw him from the top of the Athenian Acropolis. As a consequence, Daedalus was banished from Athens, though this did not prevent him from being able to get work. In Crete, he was hired by Queen Pasiphae to construct an artificial cowsuit that would allow her to seduce a bull she was particularly taken with due to a curse from the gods. Daedalus complied, and his invention helped facilitate the birth of the Minotaur. Afterwards, Minos conscripted Daedalus to build the labyrinth, presumably as penance for his role in creating the Minotaur. But perhaps the most well-known story about Daedalus involves his son, Icaros, who used wings built by his father and flew too close to the sun, thus plummeting into the sea.
Those timers go off. Your other two things are done.
Thanks.
Sometime after the birth of the Minotaur, King Minos' son Androgeos was killed in Athens by the same bull that impregnated his mother. An infuriated Minos demanded that Athens send 7 of their noblest men and 7 of their most virtuous women to Canasos every year. After being carried to Crete aboard a ship with black sails, the men and women would then be cast into the labyrinth to be eaten by the Minotaur. One of the Athenian youths chosen to be imprisoned in the labyrinth, Theseus, had enough of the morbid ritual. Before leaving Athens, he proclaimed he would kill the Minotaur, then return to his city on a ship flying white sails. Before entering the labyrinth, Theseus met King Minos' daughter, Ariadne, who fell madly in love with him. Ariadne provided Theseus with a thread he could unravel to help him find his way back out of the maze. Armed with this thread, Theseus entered the labyrinth, killed the Minotaur, escaped the maze, and set sail for Athens with Ariadne by his side.
I see you found your way through the maze of ruins. The Minoans played a large part in shaping Greek myths, but also in introducing influences from other places and cultures. Now, what else would you like to do? You want to test yourself? Very well. Let's begin with a simple question. On which island was Canasos located? Yes, Knossos was located on the island of Crete. Time for another question. Which hero killed the Minotaur? Correct. Theseus slew the Minotaur, then escaped the labyrinth thanks to some thread from Ariadne. Now for the last question. What did Daedalus build for Queen Pasiphae? Yes, Daedalus made Pasiphae a cowsuit, so she could seduce the bull she was cursed to love. Congratulations, traveler. You are a true student of history. Farewell, traveler. I hope you enjoyed exploring the ruins.
Hail, friend, and welcome to Olympia, home of the Olympic Games. My name is Barnabas, and I'm a ship captain. Don't be fooled by my eye. Though I've seen my share of combat, I mostly stick to trading these days. Well, trading and introducing visitors like you to wonderful sights like this. We're standing in the main section of Olympia, where the Olympic Games themselves took place. Over the course of the festival, athletes competed against each other for prestige and glory to honor themselves and their cities. Enjoy your visit, friend. I'll check in when you're done to make sure you've been paying attention.
The first day of the Olympic Festival began with a swearing-in ceremony for the participating athletes, trainers, and judges. The ceremony took place in front of the altar of Zeus Horkios, or Zeus of the Oath. Athletes would swear that they would follow the Olympic rules, while judges promised to be fair and unbiased. Then the competitions began, starting with a contest between heralds and trumpeters over who would have the privilege of announcing the games. The first day's athletic competitions consisted of wrestling, running, and boxing events for the youngest athletes, aged 12 to 18. The second day began with a grand procession into the Hippodrome to celebrate the start of the popular equestrian events. The most anticipated and spectacular of these was the quadriga, a four-horse chariot race. Horse racing events were unique in that the winner was not the most skilled jockey, but the owner of the fastest horse or chariot. The Spartan princess Caniska once took advantage of this loophole to skirt the rule that women weren't allowed to compete, and earned 2 Olympic victories in the process. The rule also allowed for occasionally strange results, like in 416 BCE, when the statesman Alcibiades entered 7 chariots into a race and won 1st, 2nd, and 4th place. After the equestrian competitions, the 40,000 spectators migrated to the stadium to watch the pentathlon events. When the day's events were over, funeral rites were performed for the hero Pelops, the mythical founder of the Olympic Games. The night ended with a celebratory feast and a great parade in honor of the day's victors.
Είτε μουσική εν ρυθμό τινή, άδετε και εργάζεστε. Ουκούν, γρηγορείτε παιδες.
Alócotón Tamala.
This is a big giant mess. Gotta get in there.
Ο αυτής πατήρετε εθνίκη ή τους αγώνα γινόμενων.
Κατεσχύρασα τον περιβεραίο της θυγατρός και δεν αντιλαμβανόμεθα τόσο ικανός όσο η μέτερη άπαξ.
Ούτως ουκ αντιμιμείται τα σπουδαίας αξίας των ιστοριών του. Εναντίον, επιμηχανάτε ταύτας και πρόσμη... Καταδικαστέ είναι ηθική αξία το τραγωδοποιό. Τραγωδοποιός έστι κλέπτης ως δια των υποκριτών κλέπτη την χάρη του. Λέγει ούτως ότι συμμορία την άλλη περιοχή αένας, συνεφαρφάζους ράξεις και βοηθείας και βοφύλακος, ράξεις και παρεπόμενα αυτών Άθηνα προεπιλέγονται και υφάπτονται αλλήλεις κατά το δέον και
Victory at the Olympic Games was one of the highest honors a mortal could achieve, and there were several ways to immortalize that honor. Some athletes had statues erected of themselves, while others commissioned poets to write them victory odes. Oral tradition was very important to the Greeks. These odes, called eponychia, were often composed by the finest poets in the land, such as Pindar, Simonides, and Bacchylides. They were usually played at banquets and celebrations attended by the triumphant athlete or upon his departure from Olympia.
Ο πατήρ μου λέγει ότι τη νύχταν
Ο γείτον μου, εώρα και...
Ωρα, πλείσμονες κλεφτριδίων του Πενθέρος και ούτως κατήγες σπουδαίων.
The pentathlon took place at the stadium on the second day. As its name implies, it was made up of 5 events: discus throwing, javelin throwing, jumping, racing, and wrestling. There are several differences between the ancient version of events and their contemporary counterparts. For example, ancient long jumpers held weights in their hands to give them momentum to launch, since there was no run-up before the jump. Similarly, if an athlete won the first 3 events, they were immediately declared the winner, instead of being judged by their overall performance in all 5 events. Running events work the same as they do today, with the notable exception of all the athletes being nude. As for wrestling, competitors were not divided by weight class as they are today, but instead by age. The winner was the first to throw his opponent to the ground 3 times. Day 3 started with the most important event of the festival. A procession of Hellenodikai, ambassadors, competitors, and animals made their way to the great altar in front of the Temple of Zeus. The animals were then offered as the official sacrifice of the festival. The afternoon of Day 3 was dedicated to foot racing events. Running was the oldest event of the Games, and in fact was the only event at the first Olympics. The main race was called the Stadion, which was a sprint of around 180 meters. The winner was granted the honor of lending his name to the 4-year period between the Games. This period was known as the Olympiad. The 4 years that followed the first Games in 776 BCE were known as the Olympiad of Coroebus of Elis, the first Olympic champion. Once all the competitions were over, a public banquet was held in the Parthenon to celebrate the day's victors. Day 4 was mainly for combat events. Wrestling matches were held in the morning, followed by boxing and pankration. Pankration was a no-holds-barred mix between wrestling and boxing. Almost all moves were permitted, except for biting, poking the eyes or mouth, and striking the genitals. The event was very popular, and it was seen as the ultimate expression of strength and technique. Later on in the afternoon, there was a unique racing event called the Hoplitodromos, or race in armor. In this event, competitors wore a helmet and held a shield to simulate running in the battlefield. The Hellenodikai, or judges of the Greeks, were both the game's adjudicators and their organizers. They hailed from Elis, the city in charge of the sanctuary of Olympia, and new judges were elected each Olympiad. They had several responsibilities. Before the games started, they decided which athletes would be allowed to compete and supervise their training. They also drew lots to make the competition brackets. During the games themselves, they picked the winners and kept an eye out for foul play. For the latter, they were assisted by stick and whip-wielding umpires who stood near the athletes and punished them if they were caught cheating. Victory in Olympia was one of the most prestigious honors in all of Greece. Not only would victors be showered in glory in their home city, but their names would be known across Greece. The temptation to glory led some athletes to break their oath to Zeus and cheat. This could be dangerous, as there were many possible punishments should cheaters be caught. They could be disqualified and fined, or if they were caught cheating during a match, they would be beaten by nearby umpires. The most powerful deterrent of cheating, however, was shame. At the foot of Mount Kronios, and on the way to the stadium, were a group of bronze statues called Zanes, the plural of Zeus. These statues were inscribed with the names of the cheating athletes, how they cheated, and the fine that was imposed. The Zanes, which were funded by cheaters' fines, were strategically placed to be highly visible. Individuals or even entire
No, I do. I gotta
cities
come out
could be
there.
found guilty of cheating.
Τόσο ικανός όσο η μέτερη άμεση. Ουδής συνεργάσει η μετέρη σου το σέγγι. Η αδελφή μου λόγος κακή μεσοπιτική δεν έπαιζε με...
Ναι.
I ain't let her out.
The
Snuck
Parthenon
him.
was the administrative center of the cult of Olympia and the Olympic Games. The building housed the sanctuary's priests as well as the game's officials. It was also used to stage the grand banquet held on the evening of the third day to honor victors. It also had a sacred function. Its central chamber was the location of the Fire of Hestia, a sacred flame that burned day and night. This fire was used to light the other altars around the sanctuary.
Yeah.
This practice may have partially inspired the modern tradition of carrying the Olympic torch.
Οι χαρακτήρες εν τες τραγωδίες προαιρούν... Τραγωδία ανέρεσης εστί. Εστί μιασμός, μυτιόμενος συνακλονίσει την ισορροπία του πνεύματος. Τας γυναίκας διατέχεστε, χώρο ταύτης. Το αυτό και της δούλης. Τους Τους νέους διδάσκεστε τα μηχανήματα αυτής ή να η εσύ αναγνωρίζει ταύτα. Και τους όφρονας πολίτας διεπιθεάζει τους θεούς. Δεοκλητώσει ούτως ώστε η πατήρ της προϋποπτεύει μη ο αρτηγενής Υιός ανατραφής γίνει τραγωδονία.
Hello again! I hope you enjoyed your visit. With their spectacular events and lavish banquets, the Olympic Games were a feast for the senses. I am certain even Zeus himself was entertained by the festivities. Now, is there anything else you'd like to do? Wonderful! Let the mental Olympics begin. Let's start with an easy one. Which notable woman won an event in the games? No, Aspasia did not participate in the games. Try again. Correct! She won 2 equestrian events thanks to her savvy horse purchases. This next question is slightly more challenging. Which of the following is not a famous Greek poet? You are right! Thrasidas was a renowned Spartan general, and he didn't have time for rhymes and pretty words. Time for the final question. How many events were in the pentathlon? Yes, the Greek word for pende means 5, and the pentathlon had 5 events. Well done, my friend. You truly possess a sharp mind. Very well. Safe travels, my friend. This is Delphi, home of the renowned oracle. Greeks considered it the navel of the world. Pilgrims and kings journeyed here from all over Greece and beyond, seeking advice from Apollo. Pythia. During your visit, you will experience the sanctuary through a pilgrim's eye and discover how important oracles and prophecies were to the Greeks. Now, go off and begin your pilgrimage. I will be waiting for you at the end of your visit.
On their journey to the Temple of Apollo, pilgrims walked this sacred path up Mount Parnassus. The summer sun beat down hot on their backs. Along the way, they took in the magnificent monuments, treasuries, and statues that adorned the road. These landmarks were tokens of people's reverence for the oracle's benevolence. All were dedicated to Apollo, and most were offered by cities to commemorate military victories. The monuments represented not only their donors' piety, but also their power and wealth. The sanctity of Delphi has endured to the present day, and visitors still take this very same route.
Τι ακριβής τελείως, ούκα έστειλε σπουδαίων.
Σως πατήρης τα ανέσχυτος κλέπιος. Σκυθικών εμπόρευτος αυτής. Δίπλος τα πρωτίστος σκυθιακό.
Πάβονται τότε. Προσέτηκε εντός του οίκου.
Κληρονομήσας της μικρός στην ουσία και λέγεις μηνός κρατησένου.
Ήξεν. Ποιοι ήσταν οι μήτηροι κλινήρες.
Ουχίος περσέ, μία μοιία.
All kinds of. You can't reach him. There's one there, but you can't reach him.
Έχω ευποδία και ημικαρισμός. Ο πατήρ μου έλεγε δει γιατί είναι νηστέας. Διεκδικούταν τον εκπληκτικό λάθος. Γιατί ουχή, άρον ούκ υπερχρονής.
Ή ακριβής τελείως. Ούκ έστειλη σπουδαίων. Ο εμός πατήρ...
Αληθές εστί.
Ήξερες. Ουχίος περσέ. Μια μη... άπαντα φίλια. Τι σκρόβοτι εγώ, έστε τούτο το δώρο.
Αλλό της θέμιδος ναός ούκ εστί πανήγυρης.
Η να σταθεί ένα επιχείρημα, δύο όριση. Το γίγνωσκιν και το επίσταστε. Σύμφημιση. Παλέστας τραγωδίας, Σοφοκλής δείχνεις ημίν την ή τρόπο επιτυγχάνεται τούτο.
Εν μόνο πράγμα τελείως.
Η μεταλλάτη κληρονόμησε νοικίαν και δούλους παραθείο αυτής.
Όσοι...
One of the most impressive dedications to Apollo came from the Cnidians, a Greek population that colonized the island of Lipari, north of Sicily. The story behind this dedication is notable. The Cnidians were at war with the Etruscans in the Tyrrhenian Sea. Seeking a good omen, the Cnidians consulted the oracle, and following her advice, they successfully captured 20 enemy ships. To thank Apollo, they offered the god the same number of statues as ships seized.
Σκηφικών εμπόρευμα, πρωτίστως σκηφικών. Περιφέρεια εκλεκτά, λεπτέστικα. Ήπων και γρυπών και κοσμιών.
Αντιλαμβανόμεθα ότι άλλοι 12
Σέστιο φέρα.
Αγνοείς εκ των στρατιωτών. Φαρμακέτα άπασου. Ανώτες ήταν.
Πνεύομεν τούτη στην ιδέα της φύσεως.
Ο ουρανός είναι ως περσπήλαιον, ουκ ίστα.
Πιστεύεις ότι έχει. Ο εμός αδερφός λέγει.
ή ξένους.
Next to the Naxian Sphinx stood a simple structure to display offerings from the Athenians, most of which were spoils of war. In particular, these offerings, called ex-votos, were prows of sunken Persian ships. The Athenians built the portico after their naval victory over the Persians in 478 BCE. Once arriving before the temple, pilgrims wishing to consult the oracle had to first pay a tax. This tax gave them the initial right to approach the altar of Apollo and make an animal sacrifice to the god. But before proceeding to the Pythia, the preliminary ritual had to succeed. If the animal reacted favorably and showed signs of acceptance to the god, it was sacrificed, and the pilgrim would be allowed to enter the temple to question the Pythia.
Καταδικαστέ ημίν ηθικέ αξίε το τραγωδοποιό. Τραγωδοποιός Οι χαρακτήρες εν τες τραγωδίες προαιρούνται του ύψους της διανοίας ένεκεν. Τραγωδία εκ τραγωδίας.
At last we arrive at the Temple of Apollo, where the oracle relayed her prophecies. The temple was the final destination of those seeking an audience with the Pythia, and its appearance matched the majesty of its purpose. Atop its imposing columns, the structure's pediments displayed famous mythological scenes, sculpted by the renowned Greek artist Antenor. But as grand as the temple looked from the outside, it paled in comparison with what happened within.
I'm gonna open this. Okay, Daddy?
Okay. Yeah, show me. Not about that.
Τα προσδόκητα του πελάτου και τα θεμελιώστατα δεδομένα και μετά.
Μετά ότι παριστάνε το άλγος αυτόν. Τι αλλού ευρίσκεται η γνώσης ή μη πάρεξ ότι ο χέφρον ουκ επενεργεί επί κλαθμών και οδυρμών, αλλά
Prophecies were given in the most restricted part of the temple, the adytum, by a chaste woman known as the Pythia. Before delivering prophecies, she first purified herself with water, then burned laurel leaves and barley flour to begin the ritual. Finally, while seated on a tripod surrounded by offerings, the Pythia delivered Apollo's messages. Her words were often strange and indecipherable, and required further interpretation by the temple's priests. Despite much research, the exact causes of the oracle's behavior while prophesying are debated to this day. Myths say that while searching for an oracle who could impart their words to mortals, Apollo established a sanctuary on Mount Parnassus. Apollo took over this site by slaying its sinister guardian, the snake-like python.
Μεγαλώνει με θεά, αγλαότιμε, τεχνών μήτυρ πολύολβε, Επικαλώνημε και πολιώνημε, χθονία και θυροκτώνε, φυλαχρώτη και λυτηρία, δρυμονίτης και βρωτών ελπίς. Ελθέ, η κατέχεις ωραίων δρυμούς, ελθέ θεά σώτηρα άγουσα καλούς καρπούς αποχέης ειρήνην, τερατήν καλυπλόκα μόν θυγιίαν και ό, θεά εύδρομε πέμπης δις ωραίων κεφαλάς νόσους τε και άλγη.
Πάυσε πάρα αυτά.
Your visit is complete. I hope you now understand how important this sanctuary was, and how it affected the lives of people both in the Greek world and beyond its borders. To be honest, I could speak about Delphi all day. But what would you like to do now? Ah, you wish to test your knowledge. Let's begin with a simple question. What did the oracle use to purify herself before her predictions? Correct. The oracle used water for purification. Time for another question. Which god was believed to speak through the oracle at Delphi? Yes, the oracle allegedly spoke the words of Apollo, which were then interpreted by priests. One final question for you. Delphi is situated on which mountain? No. You may want to check a map. Correct. Delphi stood on the slope of Mount Parnassos. Well done, traveler. Your knowledge rivals that of the wisest philosophers. As you wish. It has been a pleasure sharing Delphi with you.
Επικαλούμε σε μάκαρ, πολιώνημε, πυρήπολε και τελετάρχα, θεόν
Welcome, wanderer, to the democratic center of Athens, otherwise known as the Pnyx. The Pnyx was the meeting place of the Athenian assembly and the physical embodiment of democracy at work. This tour will give you insight into how citizens made decisions and kept the city running. We can talk more when you have finished the tour. See you soon, wanderer.
The Athenian assembly was known as the Ecclesia. It met at the Pnyx 40 times a year to discuss various civic matters, and each session usually lasted a few hours. The word Pnyx is believed to mean something close to packed together. This was probably a reference to the fact that during meetings of the Ecclesia, the location would be filled to its capacity, with citizens packed in practically shoulder to shoulder. All male citizens were allowed to directly participate in the democratic process. Those over 20 years old had the right to speak and vote, while those over 30 could be elected to the higher position of magistrate. In total, there were approximately 30,000 citizens in Athens in the classical period. To draft and adopt decrees, 6,000 of them had to attend the meeting.
What's going on?
Citizens came from all over Attica's 10 districts
Cool.
to attend the meetings of the Ecclesia. The meeting was presided over by an executive council called the Parthenon. Every session began with a sacrifice to Zeus Agoreos, the patron of the assembly. During the meeting, citizens delivered speeches from the Pnyx's platform on whatever issues the city faced. Afterwards, the issue was voted on with a show of hands from the gathered assembly. The Ecclesia made important decisions about subjects like grain importation, expenses, and declarations of war. While they could not directly enact laws, they had a say in appointing Athens legislators, which gave them a large role in shaping the city's daily operations. While some citizens only participated in the sessions of the Ecclesia, others could become more involved in democracy as magistrates. Magistrates were elected from among Athenian citizens over 30. They were often successful orators, charismatic politicians, and they held much more sway over important decisions than the average citizen. One of the most famous magistrates was Pericles, who was so popular, he held his position for 15 years. In theory, every Athenian citizen over the age of 20 had the right to participate in the assembly. However, some of them lived far from the city, and others could not financially afford to miss a day of work to attend meetings. For these reasons, the city introduced a special allowance called a misthos ecclesiasticos in the 4th century BCE, meant to encourage participation. Originally, it was 2 obols, but the politician Cleon raised it to 3. Athens introduced several innovations that heavily influenced modern society, including theater, architecture, and philosophy. However, their greatest contribution was their democratic government, which introduced the concept of a city ruled by its citizens. The decision to adopt democracy as a government, a choice made in 508 BCE, shaped civilization as we know it, and continues to affect us today.
Λέγωση, οι εμεί εξαδέλφοι απεκτήσαν το πολλά τη χρήματα των πρώτερων μήνων. Ο αυτής πατή ετεθνίκη, 20 αγώνα γυμνόμενων τίμερων.
Hello again, Wanderer. I trust you appreciated learning about the inner workings of the city. Is there anything else you'd like to do? Then let's start with a simple question. Approximately how many citizens were in Athens in my time?
Αναβιβάσαμε το δάρισμα επί δεύτερο
Yes, there were approximately 30,000 citizens in Athens, although the population as a whole was much larger. On to the second question. Who of the following was a famous Athenian magistrate? Yes, Pericles was an extremely popular magistrate who managed to keep his position for 15 years. Only one question left. What does the word Pnyx mean? Correct. The Pnyx was usually crowded with citizens attending meetings of the Ecclesia. You know enough about democracy to be a politician yourself. Well done, Wanderer. Very well. Farewell, Wanderer.
Κατενεχείρασα τι των περιδερέων της θυγατρός μου, οψέ, ώστε ημί χρηματίας. Κύβευσε 10 δραχμάσμι. Σύ επιλέγεις τον Κίνα.
That's cool.
Welcome, traveler, to the ruins of Mikine. These are the ruins of Mikine, center of the old Mycenaean Civilization. It was home to great warriors and heroes. In many ways, places like Athens and Sparta stand on the shoulders of its accomplishments. This tour will take you through its ruins and introduce you to its most important monuments, revealing its history in the process. I hope you enjoy yourself. I'll be waiting for you at the end of your visit.
The Mycenaean Civilization flourished in the Late Bronze Age between 1600 and 1200 BCE. During this period, it was mainly located in the Peloponnese and central Greece. Mycenaeans were known for exploring distant lands. Notably, they battled the Hittite allied city of Walusa in a conflict that was believed to be the inspiration for Homer's Trojan War. But the Mycenaean people didn't only travel to fight. They learned much from their neighbors, the Minoans of Crete, such as how to write syllabic script on clay tablets. Such tablets provide evidence that Mycenaeans spoke an early form of Greek. They also tell of how great Mycenaean kings ruled over their warriors from opulent palaces in places like Mycenae, Thebes, and Canasos. The entrance to Agamemnon's citadel, or the Lion Gate, is one of the most iconic monuments in Mycenae. It is impressive for both its height and for the intimidating rendering on its relief, which depicts two lions standing on either side of a column. Unfortunately, the lions' heads, which were presumably made of a precious metal or higher quality stone, have been lost to time. The gate was most likely meant to greet a triumphant king returning home from successful military campaigns and to awe foreign visitors. When these shafts were discovered by archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann in 1876, he believed the 6 gold-filled graves to be connected with the family of the great king Agamemnon, even going so far as to proclaim a gold mask he found within to be the death mask of Agamemnon. However, this was refuted by later excavations, which showed that the 19 bodies buried in the shafts dated back to a few hundred years before Agamemnon was even born. In fact, at the time of the body's burial, the Lion Gate and the citadel walls had not even been built yet. It's estimated that the people in the graves were members of the first Mycenaean dynasty. The graves later became a place of worship for Mycenaean kings, who raised walls to protect them. These walls helped preserve several incredible artifacts, including women's jewelry, death masks, and masterfully crafted weapons. By 1250 BCE, Mycenae was at the height of its power, and its living quarters and workshops were numerous. Houses were built everywhere, from the top of the palace's hill near the king's residence, to the slopes and terraces within the walls, to the nearby hills outside the citadel. At one point, the citadel's walls even had to be enlarged to make room for more quarters. The people who lived inside the citadel were those with high status in either the military, religious, or administrative sectors of the kingdom. This is reflected by the ceramic and metal vessels inside the houses, as well as their painted plastered walls. A traveler seeking an audience with the king would have first ascended a steep ramp from the Lion Gate to the citadel's summit. Here, they would have walked into the palatial complex through a grand entrance called the Propylon. Once inside, their gaze would immediately be drawn to the palace's main hall, a monumental area known as the Megaron. The vividly decorated Megaron, which glittered with precious objects and colorful frescoes in its heyday, was where the king would have received the traveler. If the king was feeling generous, he would have shared with the visitor the palace's most marvelous feature, its commanding and majestic view, which stretched from the plain of Argolis to the gleaming Aegean Sea. It was in this palace where a legendary Mycenaean king like Agamemnon would have held court. According to Homer and other poets, Agamemnon led the Greeks in the sack of Troy. Stories say that he was a fearsome warrior on par with Achilles, but also an overly ambitious and arrogant ruler. He sacrificed his own daughter, Iphigenia, to convince Artemis to grant his ship's passage to Troy. After conquering the city, he returned to Mycenae with mounds of riches, and a Trojan named Cassandra as his concubine. Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, was not pleased with her husband's sacrifice of their daughter. She plotted to murder her husband out of anger. The plot was successful, and, depending on the version of the story, Agamemnon was either murdered in his bath by Clytemnestra or killed by his cousin Aegisthus during a banquet.
You've completed the tour. I trust it was an eye-opening experience. Though it did not last, Mikine was a sort of precursor to what would eventually become the Greek civilization we know today. It's important we remember them, if only to avoid repeating their mistakes. Now, what else would you like to do? Then let's begin. First, I have quite a simple question. Which ancient city may have been the inspiration for Homer's depiction of Troy? Yes, The Mycenaeans' conflict with the city of Wilusa allegedly inspired Homer's Trojan War. Now, for the second question. Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia to convince which god to allow him to proceed to Troy? Yes, Agamemnon sacrificed Iphigenia to reconcile with Artemis, who then allowed his ships to pass to Troy. Now, one last question. What was the name of Agamemnon's Trojan concubine? Correct. Following the sack of Troy, Agamemnon sailed home with the Trojan prophetess named Cassandra. You've studied the ruins well, traveler. Then, I suppose this is farewell. At least for now. Safe travels. Welcome, traveler, to the site of the legendary Battle of Marathon.
Oh, shit.
Marathon was the location of one of the greatest battles in Greek history. It was here where Athenians made a stand against the might of an imposing Persian fleet. Your visit will take you through the causes of the conflict, the battle itself, and its far-reaching consequences. I will see you again once you're through. Farewell for now.
In 490 BCE, 600 Persian triremes landed on a beach 35 kilometers north of Athens. Standing in their way were 11,000 hoplites, led by the prestigious Athenian general Miltiades. The Persian forces outnumbered the Greeks approximately 5 to 1, and yet, the smaller force managed to push back their would-be conquerors. The Battle of Marathon was a major turning point in the Greco-Persian Wars, and the Athenians' victory would be celebrated for many years. The modern-day distance-running event is named a marathon in memory of a soldier from the battle who ran back to Athens to announce their victory, though whether this is real or legend is uncertain.
Okay.
The Persians wanted to invade Greece in part due to its rich silver mines. In 545 BCE, they came closer to this goal after their victory over Croesus, the king of Lydia. The victory forced some Greek populations in Asia Minor to surrender, and gave the Persians a solid foothold to carry out a large-scale invasion. In 494 BCE, the city of Miletus revolted against its Persian rulers. They were aided by Athens and the nearby city of Eretria, and even burned down an important Persian temple. The Persian king Darius was enraged by their sacrilege, and in 491 BCE, sent messengers to the Greek cities demanding their submission. Athens and Sparta killed the Persian messengers, goading Darius to invade. The Persians began their attacks, first capturing the city of Naxos and enslaving its inhabitants, then taking the city of Eretria. Filled with confidence from their string of victories, the Persians set their sights on Athens. The Greeks were surprised by the ferocity of the Persian attacks. Seeking aid against the upcoming invasion, Athens was forced to appeal to other cities for help. In a surprising move, they asked for aid from Sparta, known for having the strongest army in Greece. The Spartans agreed to the request, but they were unable to send reinforcements in time due to the religious feast of Apollo Canasos, which forbade them from leaving their city until the next full moon. The only extra help Athens managed to acquire was from the small Boeotian city of Plataea, which sent an additional 1,000 hoplites. This was the first time in Greek history that their entire civilization was under attack from an external invader. Despite sharing the same language and same religion, Greek city-states had often warred amongst themselves. The Persian invasion was the first time they realized the necessity of collective action to ensure their survival. The Persian fleet originally planned to land at the port of Phaleron. However, the exiled Athenian tyrant Hippias, who sided with the Persians, advised them to land at Marathon instead, where it would be easier to deploy cavalry. The Athenians were unaware of the Persian battle plans and left Marathon undefended. This allowed the Persians to quietly set up camp on the beach, while Athens scrambled to mount a defense. The Persians' overwhelming numerical superiority forced the Athenians to get creative with their defensive strategy. The city sent 10,000 hoplites, along with the extra 1,000 Plataean reinforcements, to a hill located above the Persian encampment. Once in position, Athenians had to decide whether to wait for the Persians to attack or to strike them first. Athens' strategists believed the former option was better, but the general Miltiades believed a first strike was more advantageous, as the Persians had their backs to the sea. In the end, Miltiades' opinion prevailed, and the Greeks made their move. According to Herodotus, the Greek forces charged at the Persians without archers or cavalry. The Persians were unprepared for what they saw as an act of madness. While they were able to hold the Greeks back at first, they were eventually pushed back to their ships and forced to retreat. The Persians suffered heavy losses during the battle, with approximately 6,400 casualties. The Athenians, on the other hand, only lost 192 soldiers.
Amazing.
The victory at Marathon was considered miraculous. The Greeks attributed this miracle to the appearance of legendary heroes who they allegedly saw return from the dead to fight at their side in defense of the city. For example, several Athenians swore they saw the mythical king Theseus take up arms at Marathon, a scene which would later be depicted in Athens' Agora. Similarly, some hoplites attested that Heracles appeared at Marathon, clad in his lion's skin and wielding a club. The supposed appearance of these heroes helped elevate the Battle of Marathon to a legendary status among the Greek people.
Okay.
After the Persians fled Marathon, they tried to invade Athens by way of the Bay of Phaleron. However, this gave the Athenians time to return to their city and mount a proper defense. Fearing further losses, the admiral of the Persian fleet called off their attack, and the Persians returned to their empire. Darius was furious at the campaign's failure, and decided to seek vengeance in a retaliatory expedition from both land and sea. Meanwhile, Sparta begrudgingly congratulated Athens on their
Doesn't
victory.
make any sense. She's in the house.
She's not.
We'll check the back door then. She's in the house when I went to pick you up. You're hiding somewhere. She probably choked on a chicken bone.
The victory at Marathon marked the beginning of a new era for Athens. According to Herodotus, Athens' success at pushing back the Persians ranked them first in the ongoing competition between the Greek city-states. The Athenians immortalized their prestige by erecting monuments in both their own city and in Delphi. The Battle of Marathon was also perceived as a blow against tyranny. Tyranny went from being perceived as a simple flaw in authoritarian excess to major treason against the homeland, a sin that rulers would take great pains to avoid being accused of. This helped consolidate the institution of democracy for the next 2 centuries.
I hope you enjoyed this look into the famous Battle of Marathon. It was not only a major turning point in the history of Athens, but also for all of Greece. Its repercussions would be felt for many years to come. Is there anything else you'd like to do? Of course. Let's start with a simple question. Which Athenian general led the Greek forces at Marathon? Correct. Miltiades led the forces at Marathon, and it was his strategy that helped the Greeks push the Persians back. Time for another question. Which Greek city revolted against the Persians in 494 BCE? Correct. Miletus revolted against Persian rule, with support from both Athens and Eretria. One more question. Which other Greek city aided Athens at Marathon? Sparta did accept Athens' plea for aid, but they were unable to send help due to the religious feast of Apollo Carnios. Try another answer. Yes, Plataea sent 1,000 oblites to aid the Athenian forces. Well done, traveler. You have learned much. Farewell, traveler. I hope to see you again soon.
Cool.
Welcome, visitor, to Thermopylae. My name is Leonidas. I am a king of Sparta. But do not think me some idle aristocrat softened by luxury. When Spartans go to war, I stand alongside them shield to shield. And my spear tastes the same blood as those of my men. Thermopylae was where a courageous group of Spartans stood amongst other Greek soldiers and held off the forces of King Xerxes, the Persian. When you're done, find me and we'll speak more.
The Persian king Darius's cries of rage echoed for years after his humiliating defeat at Marathon. Even after Darius's death, his son Xerxes continued to seek vengeance against the Greeks. According to Aeschylus, Asia was emptied of all its men. Greek spies brought the news of Xerxes' imminent invasion back to their homeland. Afterwards, many discussions were had on the best place to mount a defense. In the end, the Greeks decided on Thermopylae. The area featured a narrow pass that could act as a bottleneck for the Persian army, negating their numerical superiority. It also offered naval advantages, offering the Greek fleets opportunities for flanking. 5,000 Peloponnesian Greeks set up at a fort near the entrance of the narrow passage, otherwise known as the Hot Gates. Leading them was Leonidas, a Spartan king who prided himself on supposedly being a direct descendant of Heracles. Leonidas was accompanied by several elite soldiers who together made up the famous 300 Spartans. The Persian army arrived in the summer of 480 BCE, preceded by a flood of rumors regarding their strength and numbers. It was claimed they consumed 6,000 tons of wheat every day, and that they dried every river and brook they passed to quench their near insatiable thirst. During their march to Thermopylae, the Persians faced no opposition, and in fact, increased their numbers further by recruiting more soldiers from other Greek cities and places like Thrace. According to Herodotus, the last count of the Persian fleet was numbered at 1,207 boats, mounted by approximately 240,000 men. He estimates the land army, meanwhile, was made up of more than 1 million men. The Greek forces at Thermopylae were heavily outnumbered. Xerxes believed that at the sight of his massive army, the Greeks at Thermopylae would flee in terror. Instead, they deliberated. The majority of the Peloponnesians wanted to engage the Persians on the Isthmus of Corinth. Leonidas, meanwhile, believed it was wiser to stay put in Thermopylae. While the Greek forces debated, a Persian horseman was sent to spy on the enemy. He returned to Xerxes with surprising news. Not only were the Greeks not fleeing, but the Spartans guarding the fort were exercising and combing their hair. A far cry from the fearful soldiers Xerxes expected. To increase the pressure on the Greeks, Xerxes waited 4 more days, then attacked on the 5th. The Persians faced heavy resistance and suffered many losses, and Herodotus says Xerxes leaped 3 times from his chair, seized with fear for his army. The following day proved to be just as difficult for the Persian forces, and the Greeks continued to stand their ground. The Persians seemed poised to be held at Thermopylae indefinitely, until an inhabitant from the region came forward with information. He told the Persians of another route, which could take them around Thermopylae. A Persian contingent was sent to verify the information. While there were Greek soldiers stationed to guard the route, they were forced to flee from the Persians. Thus, on the 3rd day of the battle, the Greeks were surrounded by their enemy. With the Persians both in front of and behind them, the Greek forces at Thermopylae realized they had 2 choices: flee to live another day, or stand and fight till their last breath. Most of the Greeks chose the former option, but some stayed, including Leonidas and his 300 Spartans. For the Spartans, dying a glorious death was one of the highest honors they could achieve. The few members of Leonidas's Spartans who did not participate in the last stand at Thermopylae felt that they had missed an opportunity for honor and either committed suicide or continued living under the mockery and disgust of their fellow citizens. The Spartans' last stand was not only for glory, though. Had they not held off the Persians, the Greeks' retreating forces would probably have been cut down by enemy horsemen. On the morning of the 3rd day, King Xerxes was assured of his victory, However, that victory did not come easy. King Leonidas himself fell in battle, and a furious fight broke out around his body. The Spartans fought to the last man, and when they had all been slain, Leonidas's body was brought before Xerxes. According to Herodotus, Persians usually honored the most courageous warriors, even if they were enemies. However, Xerxes was so consumed by rage at the Spartans' resistance that instead he cut off Leonidas's head and ordered it impaled on a stake. A statue of a lion was later erected on the hill of the Spartans' last stand in honor of Leonidas's bravery. Though they were victorious, the Battle of Thermopylae shook the morale of the Persian army. They had lost thousands of men, while Greek casualties only numbered in the hundreds, and due to the sacrifice of the Spartans, the rest of the Greek army had been able to successfully retreat and regroup. As a result, even as Xerxes set up camp at the foot of Athens' Acropolis, ready to get revenge for his father's humiliating defeat at Marathon, the Persians were more anxious than confident. They were more aware than ever that the Greeks did not fear them, and were ready to die defending their land. In the end, the Battle of Thermopylae was still a loss for the Greeks. However, the battle gave the Greeks a boost in morale that carried them all the way to their decisive victory over the Persians in the Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE. With the war against the Persians finally won, the Greeks were able to honor the sacrifice of Leonidas and his Spartans with memorials and poems, forever solidifying the glory of Sparta's military prowess. The newfound respect for Sparta was noteworthy, because before the war, the city was seen as no more than a bully who forced itself into the affairs of others. Thermopylae changed opinions of Sparta for the better, and gave them a legitimate claim to be one of Greece's most powerful and influential cities.
You've finished. I hope you understand the magnitude of the sacrifices made at Thermopylae. Without them, the Greek people would have surely ended as a footnote in Persian history. Is there something else you'd like to do? If you think you're ready, let's begin. First question. Who was Xerxes' father? Yes, one of the main reasons Xerxes invaded Greece was to get revenge for Darius' defeat at the Battle of Marathon. Another question for you. Which battle is seen as the final victory against Xerxes' Persian forces? Correct. The Battle of Plataea helped put an end to Xerxes' invasion. One last question. How many Spartans fought at the Battle of Thermopylae? Yes, 300 of us stood against Xerxes' forces. You've done well, visitor. I have no more questions for you. Farewell, visitor.
Welcome to Amphipolis, traveler. The city of Amphipolis was the site of one of the more unique battles of the Peloponnesian War. Two generals, the Athenian Cleon and the Spartan Brasidas, fought for this land in an effort to control the resources it provided. In the end, though, neither got what they wanted. Look for me when you finish your visit, and we can speak of what you've learned.
The land that would come to be known as Amphipolis was originally part of Thrace, a region inhabited by formidable semi-nomadic horsemen. Thrace was rich in gold and silver mines. It was surrounded by lush forests, making it very attractive to outside parties like Greece and Persia. By 513 BCE, Persia had managed to conquer much of Thrace. But after their defeat in 479 BCE, Athens made a play for the land. They conquered the nearby island of Thasos in 465 BCE, but the military prowess of the Thracian riders kept them out of the country's interior. It was only in 436 BCE that Athens established a solid foothold in Thrace with the founding of Amphipolis, a city on the banks of the river Strymon. During the Peloponnesian War, the Spartan general Brasidas sought a way to subvert Athenian power across the Greek world. He set his sights on capturing the coast of Thrace, hoping to seize the resources the area provided. Brasidas knew that many of the Greeks living in Thrace hated the greed and brutality of their Athenian neighbors and decided to take advantage of the situation. He set off on an expedition to Amphipolis, accompanied by 1,000 hoplites and 700 helots, and arrived before the city in the winter of 424 BCE. At Amphipolis' ramparts, Brasidas announced that he preferred to take the city peacefully, and promised to allow safe passage to any inhabitants who wished to leave, in addition to sparing those who wanted to cooperate. This proposal was well received by the city's residents, and he was able to capture Amphipolis without striking a single blow. Brasidas' march on Amphipolis blindsided the Athenians. By the time they heard the news and dispatched the general Thucydides to defend Amphipolis, Brasidas had already rallied several nearby cities to help him defend the region from Athens' so-called tyranny. After half a day's journey from Thasos, Thucydides arrived at the port of Aeon, but was unable to retake Amphipolis. Athens held Thucydides responsible for the loss of Amphipolis and forced the general into exile. In spite of Brasidas' achievements, Sparta did not send him reinforcements, which forced the general to negotiate a truce with Athens to hold on to the ground he gained. The matter of how to deal with Amphipolis divided Athens. The politician Nicias, as well as the city of Sparta, hoped that peace could be negotiated. However, the popular Athenian statesman and general Cleon wanted to continue fighting the war. Indecision continued until 422 BCE, when Cleon was elected as one of Athens' strategists. This decision made it clear that the city's people were in favor of war. The truce was ended, and Cleon began his journey to Amphipolis, retaking small towns that had been conquered by Brasidas along the way. On arriving at the port of Aeon, Cleon requested troops from the king of Macedonia. He also hired several Thracian mercenaries to bolster his force's numbers. Afterwards, all Cleon could do was wait for the remainder of his reinforcements. While they waited, the Athenian forces began to resent Cleon's hesitation to attack. They saw him as soft and incompetent, especially compared to their opponent, Brasidas. Sensing the tension, Cleon decided to act without waiting for reinforcements to arrive. He set out from the port of Aeon to observe Amphipolis, setting up a camp on a nearby hill. To Cleon's surprise, Amphipolis appeared to be completely unprotected, with no guards stationed at the city's gates and ramparts. However, the city's lack of protection was only an illusion. Even so, upon seeing this, Cleon regretted that he did not bring wooden towers, which would have allowed him to easily recapture the city. Brasidas positioned his own troops in a nearby wooded area to get a better view of Cleon's army. When the Athenians began moving to set up camp, Brasidas returned to Amphipolis. He believed his army was less well-trained than the Athenians and decided to rely instead on cunning tactics and Cleon's inexperience as a military leader. Brasidas organized a two-prong attack. He would personally lead a small raid, then one of his lieutenants would follow up with a second attack shortly after, disorienting the enemy. He had barely finished formulating his plan when he saw Cleon's army pack up and retreat back towards the coast. The cowardly display made Brasidas realize that perhaps victory would be easier than he thought. After seeing Brasidas' troops return to Amphipolis, Cleon decided to fall back to the port of Aeon and once again wait for reinforcements. Unfortunately, his exact orders were confusing and contradictory, which left the Athenian forces in disarray. Brasidas took advantage of this confusion and began his attack. Cleon's forces panicked, which made them easy prey for the Spartans. 600 Athenians were killed, while the Spartans only lost 7 men. Cleon's remaining forces took refuge in Aeon, where the bodies of their comrades were eventually returned to them, though only after being stripped of their weapons. During the pitched battle between the Spartans and the Athenians, both Brasidas and Cleon were killed. The reports of their respective deaths reflect how they were perceived as military leaders. We know almost nothing about Cleon's death, other than that he was killed by a Thracian soldier. Brasidas, meanwhile, survived long enough to be taken back to Amphipolis, where he was informed of his victory. He was buried inside the city, which was considered an honor bestowed only upon heroes, and was celebrated as the true founder of Amphipolis. The Battle of Amphipolis temporarily put an end to the hostilities between Athens and Sparta. The Athenian forces returned to Piraeus, while Sparta called back the reinforcements they'd sent from Brasidas. The death of both Brasidas and Cleon encouraged the two cities to push for peace. The negotiations took time, but Sparta and Athens eventually agreed to return to the way things were before the Peloponnesian War. The resulting treaty became popularly known as the Peace of Nicias. Throughout the Greek world, it was mostly agreed that Sparta had lost the war, in spite of Brasidas' heroic efforts. The sentiment was rooted in the fact that Sparta had failed to end Athens' domination over Greece, something they had promised to do at the start of the war.
I see you're done with your tour. The Battle of Amphipolis may have briefly put an end to the Peloponnesian War, but the so-called Peace of Nicias was only temporary. It would not be long before Sparta and Athens came to blows once again. Now, is there something else you'd like to do? Feeling up to a test? Then let us begin. Which Athenian politician wanted to negotiate peace with Sparta? Correct. Nicias wanted to build on the truce that was negotiated after Brasidas captured Amphipolis. Now for the second question. Where did Tsukidis and Cleon arrive before moving to retake Amphipolis? Phaleron was one of Athens' ports. Try again. No. Piraeus was closer to Athens. Keep trying. Yes. Ion is where both Thucydides and Cleon's forces arrived before trying to retake the city. I have one last question for you. Amphipolis was located in which region? Yes, Amphipolis was located in Thrace. It seems there's nothing I can ask that you cannot answer. Congratulations, traveler. Very well. I hope you enjoyed your visit.
Through the ancient trees, where legends grow.